Hello, Bill.
Hello, Matt.
Welcome back to the DMZ, everybody. A pretty busy week this week, Bill. I feel like the whole Trump, I don't know, the last 2 years really with the election and now the administration, it's been one thing after the other. And here we have a week where we have stuff about Russia, revelations about Russia coming out. I don't even think we'll probably talk about that because, frankly, I've talked so much about it. But you've got the Gorsuch nomination, a new Supreme Court justice possibly, and this big health care bill, the Trump care, the Ryan care. We're taping this on Wednesday. It's allegedly going to come up for a vote in the House on Thursday. So, man, we are staying busy.
Well, this is when the actual governing begins. We've had 2 months where it's been executive orders and rallies and bluster, with a healthy mix of potential scandal swirling about. And now it is: can you actually pass things through Congress? Can you elect somebody who claims to be the greatest negotiator who's ever lived, but has never actually functioned in government, and get things done? And all the whip counts that we're seeing, it's Wednesday, maybe you're hearing this after what happens on Thursday, but all the whip counts that are being published say the votes don't exist in the House right now. And I would assume if Speaker Paul Ryan knows he doesn't have the votes, that bill won't go to the floor. He'll pull it, and they'll go back to the negotiating rooms and try to tweak it some more.
Yeah, that's right. It would be, so we're taping this Wednesday morning. Apparently Trump is meeting with the Freedom Caucus again today. There was a reports yesterday, I guess Tuesday, that he was joking about sort of taking down was it Mark Meadows, the guy's name, the head of the Freedom Caucus?
Right.
And then people were like, he was just joking, I think, but he is warning them that if they don't pass this, that they could lose. It would be devastating. And look, I think, the average midterm loss of House seats is like 32. And obviously, I think Republicans have they don't have that big of a majority. So now there is a lot of some may call it gerrymandering, others may call drawing of districts that I think probably insulates them from that sort of the usual ups and downs, turbulence that a midterm. But still, in all, it is fair to say Republicans, it could be a tough midterm. But I just don't know if it's worse to pass this or not to pass it, actually.
Well, you wrote earlier at the Daily Beast about Trump's charm offensive. So, Trump goes to the House on Tuesday, jokingly threatens to take people out if they don't vote for this bill. Otherwise says it's in your political interest to vote for this. I think you will lose if you don't vote for this. But certainly no one came out after that and said, I've changed my mind. He convinced me.
There was one guy.
I was a no-nom, yes.
No, there was one guy. I don't know if it was after that exact meeting, but there was one guy from like Alabama who was like against it, and then talked to Trump and changed his view, but had no rationale for changing it.
Okay, well we credit what Trump's.
This is a few days ago.
Trump's magic touch has worked on one person,
one guy. But I would say this, Bill. Here's one of the things I think is interesting about this. Trump got elected president. Trump won the nomination and got elected president by being negative, by warning, if you don't elect me, these bad things are going to happen. It was a fear-based campaign, based on a negative fear-based campaign. And now he's trying to pass this biggest first piece of legislation by fear. if you don't elect me, if you don't vote for this bill, you're going to lose. Which it strikes me as not coincidental that like he's not offering like this is an aspirational opportunity to fix healthcare once in a generation. No, it's very transactional, and it's very based on and it's very negative. And I don't know. To me, I think that's a really interesting. That seems to be the way he operates.
Well, we're not saying. I mean, not that there's no positive appeals being made, but we're certainly not seeing a lot of. Oh, if you pass this, people are going to have so much more wonderful health care. They're going to be so tired of winning with their health care. That's not the main message coming out now. The main message is you better do this, and I don't get the sense. I think fear appeals work a lot. Fear is probably the greatest motivator that exists in politics. But Donald Trump, for credit his political victory in his campaign all you like, he's hardly a political expert. And I don't know, I certainly don't see the evidence that someone who has won multiple elections in their congressional district is not taking an assertion from Trump that's not really based on anything, just him saying, I think you're going to lose if you don't vote for this. That's not being interpreted by the congressman saying, oh, I guess I'm going to lose if I vote for this because Trump told me so. They feel they know their districts better. Mark Meadows came out and said, I don't think anyone's going to run to my right in my district, so I'm good. I'm going to be okay.
Right,
and you're not.
Well, and there was a guy I heard somebody on WAMU yesterday, the NPR station, who basically said Donald. It was Ted Yoho. President Trump can't vote for me, right. Which I thought was a telling statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think Donald Trump could, if he decided to be vengeful. He could he could pick a couple, 2 or 3 people to try to like defeat in a midterm primary. But the idea that he could sort of wholesale go after everybody, that he would have time to do that, and that would be his focus, seems unrealistic. Look, if one person like goes out of their way to piss him off, yes, I do think that obviously it would not be terribly uncommon for a president to have some sort of retribution like that, whether it's even just withholding funding from the NRCC or whatever. But the idea that he could sort of go after everybody who votes against this bill, doesn't seem plausible.
Well, I would be I could not be a happier person if we were going into 2018 with Donald Trump going on the trail to campaign against Republican incumbents, even just a few. I'm sure I mentioned this on a past show, but it's one of my favorite historical anecdotes, which is when FDR did that. FDR in 1938 had it with conservative Democratic resistance to his agenda, openly stated his desire to purge conservative elements from the party, and picked his targets to try to oust him in the primaries of 1938, and lost all those races, angered the conservative faction in his party, drove them into the arms of the Republicans, and basically stifled the rest of the New Deal agenda because he tried to govern out of pique instead of building broader coalitions.
It is pretty amazing how many things like that FDR did. And especially since we sort of historically revere him so much, and we view Trump as being such a norm-breaking presence. But the court packing thing was insane,
right?
Or just egregious.
Right.
I mean, it is the
kind
of thing. It's actually the kind of thing Trump would threaten to do, but probably wouldn't do.
The court packing preceded the purge. FDR wins in a landslide in 1936. He gets a massive case of hubris, thinks he can do whatever he wants and the people will follow him. He comes right out of the box with court packing in 1937, which he did not run on in 36. And there's massive backlash to that. And often you hear that, well, even though he didn't successfully pack the court, he scared the bejesus out of the court, and they moved in his direction, and therefore he lost the battle but won the war. That's actually not true. The so-called switch in time that saved the nine, this one court case where they seemingly flipped to FDR, they had actually made that decision before Trump made the court packing announcement. It just hadn't been released yet.
Before FDR made the court packing announcement.
Correct. So,
did you say Trump?
I'm sorry?
I think you said Trump.
Oh, maybe I made a mistake. I meant FDR. I apologize.
That's all right.
So FDR, went way overboard unnecessarily. And then even after that switch happened, his advisor said, look, hey guy, you won here. Why don't you back off? This doesn't go anywhere in Congress. And he wouldn't back off. And then, and then following that, he went with the purge strategy, which also was compounding his failure. So yeah, I mean, that was certainly a attempt at norm breaking by a guy who had broken a lot of norms successfully up until that point. And he just didn't know when to quit. Trump, similarly, I think, does not know when to quit. There was a point I made in a piece I wrote the other day. Bill Clinton had a pretty bad first 6 months. We talk about, Trump's, this is the worst polling of any president in his first 2 months, which is true, but Clinton's was pretty bad. He lost a stimulus vote. He had to pull the plug on an energy tax after it cleared the House, but wasn't going anywhere in the Senate. And then he had the awkward don't ask, don't tell compromise. That was all by July of his first year, and his poll ratings had plummeted considerably by that point. But in all those cases, he cut bait. He didn't go for a second stimulus.
Clinton is, I think Clinton's remembered for being very adaptive and able to evolve. And you just don't get the sense that Donald Trump has that skill set or that temperament to do that. I
mean, healthcare here, I wrote this, this is the piece where I wrote him, where I counseled Republicans to walk away from healthcare. If they don't have the votes tomorrow, and they pull the bill off the floor and they start to rework it, it's totally possible they can rework it in some way to appease the Freedom Caucus types and get it out of the House. But then the Senate looks much more complicated because you got complaints on the left and the right there that seem very difficult to bridge. So this could drag on for a while. And you're hearing Trump say we have to do health care before tax reform, which is sort of true. It's true because they made it so. Because health care is in.
Well, they want to get the tax savings from health care.
Right.
Before they do tax reform. Somehow then they want to do infrastructure. There's a rationale.
Well, I'm not convinced infrastructure is happening. It's certainly not on the table yet. They do have a ration. There is I think politically speaking you would say, if you put ideology aside, just politically speaking you would say you should have done infrastructure first or tax reform first. But there's a reason that they want to do health reform first that isn't just because they promised they would do it, but it's because it would cut the tax rate or something that would actually help them when they get time to cut taxes. Maybe you can explain this better than I can. You're shrinking the budget baseline. Once you cut the tax and you cut the spending, you got a smaller budget. And what they say is that makes getting tax reform makes it easier to make tax reform revenue neutral after that. You already pocketed.
That's how to put it.
What's that?
That's how to put it. Yeah.
You already pocketed some tax cuts. You don't have to do as much to in the next round. Therefore, you don't have to find as many offsets. Therefore, it's easier. But it doesn't make it impossible. But because they went with that philosophy, they said, okay, both of these things also we don't want to be filibuster. Let's do them through budget reconciliation. But you only can do one budget reconciliation bill at a time. So let's do health care in the fiscal year 2017 budget reconciliation, and we'll do tax reform in the fiscal year 2018 budget reconciliation, and therefore you have to do one first, then the next. You can't, once you leave 2017 budget reconciliation, that's done, you can't circle back to it. So if they pull the plug on healthcare now, and they jump to tax reform instead, they can't do healthcare via reconciliation until fiscal year 2019. So they've created a structure where they have to do this first. So they tell themselves that, therefore,
and it makes. I mean, I think it's almost too cute by half. I mean, it makes sense. There is a strategy to it, but it's a strategy that suggests everything is going to go right. You can ram things through, and policy details be damned. The fundamental problem here is that this is a bad healthcare bill. And even if you fix it, so-called, to get it to pass the House, not only is it going to be harder to pass the Senate for political reasons, but it's still going to be a bad bill. They can't fix the underlying architectural problems with the bill. But hey, since you were talking about reconciliation, I don't want to spend too much time on this because I think it's a pipe dream and a moot point. But did you hear that Ted Cruz, The Hill wrote about this, Politico wrote about this, Ted Cruz wanted to put everything in reconciliation. Like, you know how there's these three phases?
Yeah.
Certain things that are not reconcilable because they have nothing to do with the budget.
Right.
Cruz wanted to put everything on the House, pass everything through the House, and then when the Senate parliamentarian objects to it, Mike Pence would overrule him. And they would just do it.
Well, you couldn't overrule with just Pence. You need 60 to overrule.
No, see, that's that is the interesting thing. That's what I thought, but apparently there's a way that you can basically say that Mike Pence, at least this is according to Cruz's theory, you don't need 60. Mike Pence just says, "No, you're a staffer. That's interesting advice, but no."
I mean, I
they're obviously not pursuing this strategy. I don't think Ryan or McConnell would go along with it. I mean, it basically would be tantamount to killing the filibuster for everything. Because anyway,
you could declare anything it belongs to reconciliation because the VP can overrule the parliamentarian, and boom, no more filibuster.
Yeah, you have to do it once. You could do it once a year, but that's how it would work.
I mean, reconciliation was designed as a deficit reduction tool to make it easier to cut the deficit by exempting deficit reduction measures from filibusters, and limiting how often you can do that. You got one bite of that apple per fiscal year,
right?
And that's it.
And this would basically blow up the Byrd rule, as they say,
right? Because the Byrd rule requires 60 votes to overrule, and therefore you can't circumvent the filibuster by going beyond the deficit reduction mandate.
Yeah. If anyone's interested, just Google Ted Cruz parliamentarian Mike Pence, and there's The Hill wrote about this last week, and Politico wrote about it last week. But I think I was actually going to probably write about it, but I think it's probably just a moot point now. No one's going to go for it.
Well, I sense that you have amongst the Freedom Caucus types, including those in the Senate like Ted Cruz, who are sort of in that mold, that there isn't a unanimous, singular piece of the bill they don't like. I hear different complaints from different people. But
I think this argument, it hasn't really caught on, but this argument would let Cruz continue to play the whole we could have defunded Obamacare if they'd if the Republican Party had stayed firm,
right?
And now this does set him up to sort of make the argument we could have really repealed and replaced Obamacare if the leadership would have done what it takes to, But I guess the problem with that is, you'd have to get Mike Pence to agree to this too. So, you probably can't really blame Pence and Trump in this environment.
But I'm hearing Cruz say you should have tacked on all the non-budgetary elements to it, and since you're not doing that, I'm going to oppose. I've heard Dave Bratt say the big problem here is the premium price increases that happen in the short run. If you fix that, I'd be okay with it. You hear others complain about the tax credit structure, how that's just another entitlement. Some people will complain that the Medicaid provisions don't happen fast enough. So you've all these competing complaints on the right. You have, I think, a clear objection amongst the few Senate moderates saying we don't want you to blow up the Medicaid stuff because that's going to hurt people in our state. And so on one hand, you could say, well, if you have these myriad of objections on the right, well, maybe you can pick people off and get the 216 in the House and at least get over to the Senate. But with so many competing complaints, it just seems to be a recipe for this debate dragging out. And since the debate could drag out, you are pushing off the tax reform issue because you can't get to that until you're done with this reconciliation process. And if you let the tax reform debate lapse too long, you're going to run out of time.
Well, not okay. So they're under all sorts of. They've got all sorts of problems. So, like, one of the things that Democrats are doing. Again, I'm not. I should have worked on Capitol Hill at some point. It would have really helped. But whenever they do these nominations, Democrats, because of Harry Reid, they can't filibuster these nominations, but they can take 30 hours. They can basically waste 30 hours of time every that's for debate, official or something. So Democrats are intentionally chewing up the clock. For some reason, I'm not sure why McConnell and Paul Ryan don't just say, we're going to work nonstop. We're going to keep Congress in session nonstop until, by the way, we officially go on recess for 10 days so Trump can make recess appointments.
Well, they did some weekend work. They had some of that in the first few weeks because senators do like to go home on the weekend. Whether it's being with their families,
of course they like to
touch base with constituents. So they did some of that, but I think it was literally around the clock all the time. I mean, people are human; they're going to break.
Yeah, I'm just saying they are running out of time, and not only are they running out of time, like literally, but there's also this problem. Republicans actually believe that tax reform will stimulate the economy, especially corporate tax cuts. And the problem is it doesn't happen overnight. So if you want to win the midterms, you want the economy to start kicking in and growing jobs, you have to pass tax reform now so that happens before the midterms. And that's the problem. I think, was it Mnuchin who said, that it's going to take, a year and a half or whatever before things kick in. Well, that's pretty tight if you want to have the economy turn around in time to win the midterms, or at least not have the midterms be a bloodbath.
Well, look, Obama passed his stimulus bill, the biggest stimulus bill of all time. They got that done by February. In a month of being inaugurated. It was a huge, heavy lift. All that stimulus didn't get into the bloodstream immediately. It was doled out over time. So you didn't have a gangbusters economy by the midterm, and they had a terrible midterm. But the economy definitely was better by 2012, and that helped them get over the hump then.
Right.
And that was working literally as fast as government has ever worked, perhaps in the history of economic crises. But
I think the point of this bill illustrates that it seems insane that Republicans are pushing this bad bill and trying to do this so fast. But this is why they're doing it. Now the real problem is that they didn't come up with a better idea over the last 6 or 7 years. I would say, because I've been thinking about this, I think Paul Ryan and Price and others do deserve a lot of blame for not having figured this out 6 or 7 years, over the last 6 or 7 years. But I think that they had a much bigger problem than Democrats, in the sense that Democrats are pretty much agreed that the government has a role in healthcare, and they're fighting over the edges. Like, should it be single payer? That kind of thing. But they're agreed on the central premise, and they're fighting over the details. Republicans are still in the midst of an identity crisis and a fight. That fight between Marco Rubio, let's say, and Ted Cruz, that was supposed to happen in 2016. And who knows? But if Donald Trump, if this foreign entity hadn't entered into the party, maybe there would have been a clash, a fight between Cruz and Rubio, those two wings, and maybe it would have worked itself out. We're the party of Cruz, we're the party of Rubio. Republicans were deprived that chance of having that fight, and so Trump is now inheriting a party that has still not had come to terms with that sort of fundamental collision or decision.
No, I think they won before they were ready. This was the cake. The Republican cake wasn't fully baked, and now they're stuck doing things on the fly. The initial
There's
plan,
no consensus.
What's that?
There's no consensus.
Right. Well, the initial
because
plan
it didn't happen organically.
Ryan McConnell was not to do health care at all right now. It was to do a symbolic repeal, then wait several years for doing an actual replacement plan. And they got roped into this by the Freedom Caucus types, and then they had to whip something up that was also half baked.
Well, doing a symbolic repeal might be one thing, but my fear was that they were actually going to repeal it and not replace it. And I think that would, and I know a lot of my friends on the right like that idea. Like Rand Paul says, that's the one thing we can agree on. We should all just, I think that's utterly irresponsible to repeal it, even if you set a deadline, without replacing it. That's just me.
Now, I think there's another unforced error here. You talked about the problem of waiting to pass tax reform too long, and the stimulative effect doesn't kick in time for the election. I think there's a problem that Trump has layered on top of that, which is he has effectively promised the business community that tax reform is coming. And arguably, I mean, it's hard to know for sure what impacts the stock market, but there are stock observers that say the recent bull market is partly fueled by the expectation that this big windfall is coming. So what happens to the stock market if by, say, September, it's becoming clear that, hey, tax reform is far from a sure thing? Who knows if this is going to happen? Do you get a stock market correction around the turn of the year because the Republican Congress doesn't have its act together?
Well, it hasn't. It's been down the last couple days. I mean, for the first time. So, I don't know if that's reflective of the sense that.
It's hard to know. It's hard to know exactly what impacts the market on a day-to-day basis. But Trump is a classic overseller. He is constantly promising things that he can't deliver on, with the hope that even if he only comes through on 10% of what he's selling, you'll take it. He's not the first politician to be an overseller, but he seems to be incapable.
Which is the opposite of what you should do. It's the fundamental. One of the sort of fundamental maxims of politics is under promise and overachieve. You always want to, if you're debating somebody, you want to have your people talk about how great they are. And if Matt can just hold his own, it'll be a victory, right? Bill Clinton and New Hampshire made him the comeback kid. When you're booking a room for a political rally, this is the kind of stuff you learn when you're starting out in politics at the local level. You book a room for a political rally, always book a room too small. It's much better to have standing room only, people packed. You bring in balloons to fill up space. I think his name is Jerry Bruno. His last name is Bruno. JFK's advance man invented a lot of these tricks, and he would cordon off rooms so that they look small. And you know what he would do? He would, if JFK was coming to give a speech, he would book. So before the Pledge of Allegiance, there'd be a marching band that would perform, and then there'd be a different marching band like after the speech, and he would give each of the kids, it would be like a local high school, he'd give each of the kids 2 tickets, and it was, you can only bring 2 people to this rally. It's very, but you have 2 tickets. You could bring your parents, but only 2 tickets. So there'd be like 50 kids in marching bands who would, bring like 100 people with them. So there'd be like 150 extra people in the room. This is like one of the tricks he did, under promise, small room, over deliver, a big crowd. This is like a fundamental maxim, and then you have Donald Trump, does not observe this one. His maxim is leap and the net will appear, I think.
Well, I think there's an oversell model in politics that works too. I mean, the thing you get from overselling is that sometimes you win. You deliver you pronounce these giant promises, you get people excited, and they vote for you, and then at least you're there, and you can try to do something once you get there. And look, he got to where he is by overselling his entire life. So you can't really knock that.
That's called the fake it. That's fake it till you make it.
Right, but I do think
I've always thought that was a.
But
I've always thought that was a dangerous
strategy.
philosophy.
You have to eventually recalibrate and adjust people's expectations. He's still overselling. He's still going to rallies and saying, "We're going to build a wall. Drug prices are going to come down tomorrow." At some point, I think at some point, that strategy starts to once you're in governing mode, that strategy starts to not look so good.
Well, I'll tell you one area where I think he did deliver is packing the court with Neil Gorsuch, who this is the one thing keeping him from plummeting on the matometer this week.
Yeah, we haven't done the matometer in a while. Where is he now?
I think we should kill the matometer. I don't know.
Has it broken completely?
It's broken. But I think this is the bright spot of the week. And not only is Neil Gorsuch amazingly awesome, but I really thought, I didn't watch the whole hearings because I have a life, but I did see Dick Durbin. Did you watch yesterday, Tuesday, the Dick Durbin's interrogation of him?
I have not.
Okay, for everybody out there, it's really worth watching because Durbin was asking him some really hardball questions, and Gorsuch was knocking him out of the park. And it really showed the point, which is if you really have your stuff together, you want an opponent to be tough on you. It was very impressive. If more conservatives, and I realize that the court is, it's not left versus right per se. I mean, it's like textualist versus what, but, I just bastardized it. I mean, if more conservatives could communicate the way that Neil Gorsuch communicated, it would be, I could just retire. I could just walk away from all this. The glamour, the glitz, the glory. He's basically, it's everything that you would want, Maybe he'll like blow up today and say something really stupid, and this will come back to haunt me. But based on what I saw Tuesday, very impressive. Now, interestingly, Democrats, I don't know if you saw this, Bill, Elizabeth Warren and some others have come up with this theory: you can't confirm a justice in the middle of the Russia scandal. That it would be irresponsible for us to. It just seems so. It's so obviously they're trying to do what Republicans did about you can't confirm in the last year of a presidency. You can't confirm a justice. It seems pretty transparent.
I think that's. It's a little grasping at a straw. If you're, I have complained about Democratic messaging in Supreme Court battles for my entire existence as a political writer. They don't seem to have grasped that you need to have a consistent set of principles that you communicate all the time, win or lose. You're obviously not going to win every Supreme Court battle, but if you're communicating a set of principles all the time, at least you are communicating to the public what your judicial philosophy is, and perhaps can win the long game with that. I wrote a piece in Politico in February right at the nomination, the Gorsuch nomination, which a lot of people on the left have shared because the headline is "Why Dems Shouldn't Fear the Nuclear Option." It's an argument for full court press. Who cares if you lose the filibuster over this? And if you can't filibuster Gorsuch, then you never really had the filibuster anyway, so you haven't really lost anything. So the first half of it, the left loves. Fewer people have read the second half of the piece, where I sympathize with the predicament that the red state Democrats are in. It's not an easy vote for Joe Manchin or Heidi Heitkamp or John Tester or Claire McCaskill to oppose a Supreme Court justice on ideological grounds in a state that Trump won. So what do you say that doesn't make you appear to be a knee-jerk partisan? And I think a legitimate argument to make is this seat should not be a political football. It was treated like a political football last year when Republicans refused to give Merrick Garland a hearing, a judge that Republicans previously said was one of the best judges Obama could pick. So there's no question there was raw politics at stake. We don't want this seat to become a political football again. It's not for us to grab or for them to grab. We're going to filibuster this seat until we can get together with Senate Republicans and agree on a consensus choice that would not jerk the court in one ideological direction or another. That, to me, would be a principled opposition that would not come across like I'm just grabbing a talking point out of thin air because it's what those guys did last year.
Well, of course, Republicans would invoke the nuclear option.
Well, they would. I mean, I'm not saying they wouldn't do that, but at least you're articulating a message that would have currency, I think, with the broad middle of the public, and they'd be the ones looking crassly political in response.
Well, I don't know. Let me ask you this, because I think we'd probably both agree. Well, first let me say this. Mitch McConnell, you know how earlier I was talking about how, Republicans always love to blame leadership, and there's this narrative that the Republican leadership always bows down to the Democrats and always caves in and never fights. I mean, Mitch McConnell refused, even before Merrick Garland was named. It turned out to be a brilliant move. At the time, I thought it was a bad idea. But as soon as, like an hour after Justice Scalia had been announced that he was dead, Mitch McConnell said, we're not going to have any meetings or hearings, or we're not going to confirm anybody until after the election. And, you could say that that's heroic and smart. You could say it's evil and bad, but it was tough. It was tough and it was gutsy. And if you're like a conservative Republican who thinks that Mitch McConnell is a wimp, it kind of undermines that. You could argue that McConnell delivered a Supreme Court justice and a president in one fell swoop, and to do it instantly, to quickly take that hardline stance.
Well, I agree with you.
Let me ask you
this. It's crazy to me that folks on the right think McConnell's some kind of squish. He's as cold-hearted a character as you could possibly want in that role. I disagree with you that the Garland strategy was evidence of brilliance and guts. I think it was cowardly and lucky. He had no expectation that was going to pan out. I think he lacked the courage to actually get cross with the Republican base over that, and he thought, well, I'm just going to do the cowardly thing, and I fully expect Hillary Clinton to win, and then we're going to lose come January, and at least you can't blame me for it. He's the one who said.
No, but I think what.
McConnell's one said in the during the Republican primary, we're going to drum Trump like a hot rock if he's the nominee. He did not think he was executing some masterful strategy here.
Well, the move I would have made is, because remember, I would have feigned cooperation. Well, the president's going to announce somebody, and we'll take a look at it then. And then I would have hoped it takes a couple weeks, and then we would have found something wrong with that person, that they weren't, we would have found something wrong with them, presumably, and then we wouldn't have confirmed them. And that, it turns out, that would have been a much more messy and really unfair to Merrick Garland.
This was much fairer. I'm sure he appreciates the way all this all turned out.
Well, it's better than pretending that you're going to give him like a fair hearing all along, knowing that you have no intention of doing that. I mean, clearly Merrick Garland had a bad thing happen to him. He's wrong place at the wrong time. But anyway, I want to ask, so Republicans obviously have 53 votes, if you count Mike Pence, right? So they need 7 Democrats to do this. So I guess if Democrats do not filibuster it, then that's that, right? He just passes. But if they filibuster it, would they try to overcome the filibuster with you could get Manchin, but can you get Heidi Heitkamp? I don't know how you couldn't get to 60 with Democrats. I don't think there's. I mean, are there any old bulls who would just sort of say, look, the president has a right to make his pick?
Well, Durbin might well do that. Durbin has indicated that he leans that way. So it's not just the red state Dems that you could potentially pick off. But
it would only take one Democrat if Elizabeth Warren decides we're going to filibuster this nominee, then it's game on.
Well,
right?
I mean, there's going to be a cloture vote. I feel like we're starting to treat the mere existence of a cloture vote as evidence of a bona fide filibuster. I still hear Democrats filibustered Alito. No, there was a cloture vote that they lost, and he didn't get filibustered. But
Barack Obama wanted to filibuster Alito.
I mean, that was clearly. Everybody knew Alito was getting that vote. There wasn't a bona fide attempt to actually block the nomination. So you can say Obama voted against cloture, but it wasn't a serious attempt to actually block the nomination. So I'm sure there's definitely people that would like to block this nomination, and there's going to be a cloture vote. But could Republicans get? I think they need 8. I think they need 8 total to get cloture, and so Heitkamp, Manchin, Tester. Those are probably the 3 easiest red states that come to my mind. You also have
Colorado, right?
I was going to say Michael Bennett
from Colorado.
He introduced Gorsuch to the committee, and they said warm things about him. I think Durbin is very possible, which would be 5. Then you get into some sort of softer red Democrats, Bill Nelson in Florida, or Debbie Stabenow, Gary Peters in Michigan, Sherrod Brown, Ohio, Claire McCaskill in Missouri. Those are all possible people that you might be able to get. But I would Angus King in Maine is someone who is probably gettable.
I would be surprised if they could get 60. I would be surprised.
I would not be surprised.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. You actually think that he could get 60? Wow.
I think he can get 60. Yes. I want to go quite as far as predicting it, but I lean.
So they're going to give him a tough hearing
60.
and then say they'll give him a tough hearing, but then say, this guy, we don't agree with him, but he is eminently qualified and competent, and the president gets to pick, gets to nominate these, and unless there's an egregious problem, we will confirm them.
I think they'll say he's qualified. We're not going to be like them. 2 wrongs don't make a right. We can't have the Supreme Court become a constant partisan battleground, and I'm gonna respect tradition and yada yada yada. I mean, I think there's a number of Democrats who believe that, and a number of Democrats who realize that's the politically advantageous thing to do in their particular state. But if you're right and they don't get the 60, then I totally assume right. McConnell pushes the nuclear button and he gets in by ending the judicial filibusters for the Supreme Court.
You know what? That also might be that might be the reason you're right, that they don't want the nuclear button to be pushed.
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument that exists that we don't want the filibuster to die for judicial nomination. I mean, it's already gone for lower court nominees. We don't want to lose it for the Supreme Court. We don't want to lose it for legislation, which is probably the next step. If this was a court seat that was going to change the ideological balance of the court, if it's replacing Ginsburg or replacing Kennedy, replacing Breyer, maybe that's worth going to the mat on. But this is replacing Scalia, so don't do it here. My counter to that
that
is
makes perfect.
If you can't do it now, you can't do it anytime. If you know Republicans will junk it once you use it, it's already lost. Who cares when it happens?
Right, but for political reasons, don't you think losing? So isn't it better? So if Democrats try to block Neil Gorsuch, who seems like a really nice, good person, and there's no huge scandal, like that's not as good a PR when when McConnell goes nuclear. But so maybe that's the reason. But I don't know if the
I'm not expecting a trial today to get the next nominee. People got pretty good at scrubbing Supreme Court nominees. So even Donald Trump didn't screw this one.
Well, yeah,
up.
but the other part about it's also not going to shift the balance of the court, as you mentioned. So that's also factored into this. I mean, but anyway, I wonder if the liberal base will tolerate them being strategic like this, saying,
"Well, this is a huge question."
Yeah,
I mean, people think that if you're Joe Manchin, that you don't have to worry about the left, but that's not true. There's a mountain party in West Virginia that's like their Green Party, and if you're going to win, if you're a Democrat, you're going to win a red state. You need a coalition of what left exists in your state. Every state has liberals, just like every state. Massachusetts has conservatives, West Virginia has liberals. You need them to show up, and you need to graft on swing vote on top of that. If you have a loss of enthusiasm from your liberal base in any state, that's a potential problem, or worse, a bloodletting primary or a third-party challenge. So it's not an irrelevant factor for Manchin, Heitkamp, Tester, and others to consider that how much am I going to anger the left in my state? So how they craft the vote matters greatly, and I think they're probably going to bet that if you got to make the left in your state swallow this vote now in the middle of 2017, a whole bunch of other things are going to happen by 2018. That's going to be not the determinative factor whether they get on board or not. Manchin is going all out to save Obamacare. It's not like he breaks ranks every single time, but they all want to pick their spot so they don't get hit with ads in 2018 in the general election saying so-and-so Democrat voted with Schumer and Pelosi 95% of the time. This is one area where they probably want to break ranks so that percentage is below 90%.
All right. Well, I think that's probably a pretty good show. What do you think?
I think so. I'm willing to save our thoughts for next week.
Yeah, because this is going to be moving anyway. I mean, we could talk a lot, but things are going to change as they always do. But you want to plug anything?
I do want to plug something. It's not quite up yet. I should upload it very shortly. I have a special edition of my This Is Not Normal podcast interviewing Christine Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi's daughter, who is very active in the DNC, recently elected to the executive committee of the DNC. She did not care for the article I wrote about where I supported the DNC accepting corporate PAC money on the grounds that they need the resources to compete in the midterms. She was the sponsor of the resolution that would have banned that. She lost at the DNC in February. I invited her on the show to give her a full airing of her views. So we had a really interesting conversation about what's going on inside the DNC, and that should be up.
Is she the one who did that documentary?
That's a different daughter. That's Alexandra Pelosi.
Okay.
But so check out if you don't subscribe to This Is Not Normal on iTunes or whatever, you can get it on liberaloasis.com in short order.
Awesome. All right, we'll check that out. Read me at the Daily Beast and my podcast, Matt Lewis and the News. And you can listen to this too. Just search for Blogging Heads on iTunes. So, another great episode. Bill, thank you.
Thank you, and we'll check you next week.
All right, see you guys.